Super excited to have Brent Axe back on the Ostrom Avenue Podcast. We get Brent right before football season, and then we get him at the middle of basketball season, ahead of lacrosse season. So you get two doses of him, which is great because he has so much insight. Brent, welcome back on for I don't know how many times now. I'm losing count, but glad to have you back on.
Yeah, as long as I still have the belt, that's
I
all
think
that
you did.
matters.
I think you did.
If anybody's catching up, you get me right back on.
Yeah, well, we only get Mike Waters one. Like we get him right at the start of basketball season. We could
Yeah,
bring him on again, but then it could
no,
be a
you
decline.
don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Like Mike Waters, guys, he's been on the beat for 30 something years. Why would you want
Yeah.
his insight? Come on, give me
We
a
don't
break
need
on that
we,
guy.
we don't need it. And when we brought you on for football season, it was a lot of optimism with the season and what was going to happen. It tailored out, didn't pan out for Fran Brown. And when we did speak to Mike Waters, there was once again lots of optimism for a basketball team that looked like it was better, more talented than last year's or any of Adrian Autry's teams. And holy smokes, it's gone up to smoke. It really hasn't panned out. You know, I know it's hard to just probably put it in a sentence or anything, but how do we get from almost beating Houston to now Syracuse, can't get by any ACC team?
I think it's coaching. I think we are seeing, and again, to the listeners, I got a little bit of a cold going here, so pardon my voice. But excuse me, I got to reset my voice there. Give me a sec. Just drink some water. This is a more talented team than, how can I describe it? This team should be better. We saw it in Vegas, right? And now I get it's a different time of the year and a different situation, but if you give a great team like Houston the push that they did, and the only thing that cost you in that game was your free throws, and then you give Kansas the push that you do in the next game. Iowa State blew their doors off, but then you go and beat Tennessee. Like, you've got to build from that, right? And then they lose to Hofstra. And free throws were an issue throughout that, but we started to see some other things that were encouraging about this team, namely their defense and their points off turnovers. And you just saw a better team on the floor than last year, and certainly arguably the most talented team that Autry has had. But what has happened is we have seen this pattern of this team just wilting in the second half. And that's coaching. That is a lack of direction. That is this, I don't even know what you call this offense, but it's not a structured offense. What you're seeing other teams doing is when the going gets tough and the tough gets going, they go to their identity. Syracuse doesn't have that. You see the ball movement slow down, if there's any at all, in this iso ball stuff where one guy dribbles and four people watch. I think the main culprit of this, and I don't want to pick on him here, but I mean, just you got to look at the situation, is Nathan George is not panning out as the point guard I think they thought they were getting, right? This is a guy who just has not decided yet whether he wants to be the offense or run the offense. And just the other night, he goes 2 of 12 from the field. I think he only technically had 3 turnovers, but there were a few more air quotes turnovers when he just drives in the paint and kind of says a prayer and hopes for the best, right? He can't drive by people. He just gets in the paint and hopes the shot falls. So to me, this all comes back to coaching and structure and lack of a true blue identity on the offensive side of the ball. There's just too much freestyle going on out there. And when you have 24 and 10 from Donnie Freeman and it's wasted, you can't have that, right? Donnie Freeman made such a difference and gave this team such a lift that he can't put a Superman cape on every day. But I know I'm harping it back to the last game, but I just think it's an example of just a lot of things. Like Nate Kings has 5 shot attempts. Tyler Betts only gives you 3 points off the bench. Kyan Anthony's a freshman, and I think we have to be fair in how we assess him, but he's just not progressing to the rate that he's giving you that bounce off the bench consistently that you need. I mean, we're getting into February now. We're getting into the harder part of the schedule, and it's that old U2 song. They still haven't found what they're looking for.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, the losses, in recent games, the defense has just gotten progressively worse. And again, I keep thinking back to the start of the season. I went to the game in Philadelphia when they played Drexel, and, all Adrian Autry wanted to talk about was defense. He had this whole orange zone thing, which I haven't heard him bring up in, all of this month.
Yeah, what happened
Really,
to
that has
that? Yeah.
really disappeared. Do you think that's because of the losing, or is that again on Autry maybe not holding his standards to what he said at the start of the year?
Well, and remember in that stretch there, he looked at all of us in the press room and said, "There's nothing wrong with the offense."
Yeah.
I guess if you don't have an offense, something can't be wrong that doesn't
Yeah.
exist, right? So maybe he was right about that. The biggest concern to me is how the defense has just disintegrated.
Yeah.
There was a stat I think coming into they've lost 4 in a row, but in the last 5 games they've given up I think it's like 85 points per game, and then the season prior to that it was like 66. And I think you knew things were going to bump up once they got to ACC play, but that is a huge jump, right? So what's up with that? Like at the very least, this team could settle on that and get the points off turnovers and create opportunities. And we've seen the zone creep in a little bit more, which has not been effective. I give Autry credit for he said it the other night, right? Everything's on the table, just trying to figure out what he can. But if you have an inconsistent offensive identity, your defense is wilting, you're inconsistent from the 3-point line. We know it's an adventure every time they go to the free throw line. What do you lean on? Like when I'll say it again, when the going gets tough and the tough gets going. Great Billy Ocean song, right? What do you lean on? Who's your guy? It's just, hey Donnie, go out there and save the day. Just reminds me of my beloved Buffalo Bills.
Yeah.
Here's the plan. Josh Allen, go save
Yep.
us, right?
Yep.
Like there's just an utter lack of direction and identity on this team. And now that the defense is wilting, like that was something they could harp on. And Autry talks so much about how hard this team plays and the heart that they play with. And I mean, that's great. That should be baked in the cake. I want to see this team play smarter, not harder. They play hard enough. They have to play smarter.
Yeah, certainly. And I keep going, back to the start of the season. And I know you can't dwell in the past. You got to stay to the present. And this team isn't performing well. But I want to go back even further to I guess it was still March because the transfer portal rules were different last year. And, I was praising likes of an Alex Klein and the job that he did. I thought, oh, okay, this is what this team needed. They needed more experience in conference. They needed a Nate Kings. They needed a Tyler Betsy. It hasn't really panned out. Should he be getting some of the blame? To
No,
maybe not. You don't
no,
think so?
not at
Okay.
all. I don't think
Okay.
so because you said it. He did his job. What did they
Yeah.
needed a point guard? He got the point guard that led the ACC in assists per game last year. They needed a 3-point shooter. Nate King shot 45% from
Yeah.
3-point range. You got Tyler Betsy, who was a project, was somebody you kind of had to get on the up and hope that he
Yeah.
could contribute. I think he still can, by the way, if he's used properly. Sadiq White and Kyan Anthony are top 100 recruits. That's not Klein, but
Yeah.
like the influx they were getting to combine with Donnie Freeman, who is well on the way to being a first round pick, and JJ Starling, a senior leader, who what was he, 20 points per game last year? And he had to because he basically became the team at a point. On paper, Alex Klein delivered,
Yeah.
right? So it harpens back. I know I keep going back to the Bills, but it's like Brandon Beane said, here's this team. And I think we discovered that Sean McDermott looked at Brandon Beane and said, well, there's holes here, 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 and here,
Mhm.
and I'm going to do what I can with this. It's the opposite here.
Yeah,
Alex
that's the
Klein
point.
delivered a team that Adrian Autry, if I'm Klein, I'm like, no, man, I gave you a team.
Yeah.
And I think everybody sees it, right? And the key to that is where you got these guys from. And I didn't even mention Akir Soiree, who's
Yeah.
played somewhat of a complimentary role off the bench. Georgia Tech, Cincinnati, okay, Oregon State, high level, in some cases, Power 4, Power 5 programs. Whereas the year before, we were talking about, Hofstra and Georgia State and programs that you got to make a major leap to contribute in the ACC. So I don't put any of this on Klein. And another thing I'd like to dispel is NIL.
Yeah.
Now, is Syracuse spending what Duke does? No. But this is a team, trust me, these guys get NIL. I see JJ Starling in commercials. I see guys getting paid. This is a roster that is, go talk to Boston College. Go talk to some teams at the bottom of the ACC and their problems with NIL. Could it be better? Of course it can. Every school is begging for more NIL money. On the women's side, Felicia Leggett-Jack was just saying it the other day at her media session. They need more money to keep up with what they're doing. So everybody's asking for more money. But that, to me, that's a lame excuse.
Yeah.
Oh, it's NIL. No, look at the roster. You've got good players.
Yeah, definitely. I think you bring up a great point with the NIL that not a lot of people are talking about. And I heard you bring up this point, which I think is so, so important. You brought, I forget, it was one of your post games. You brought it up.
Mm.
And for WAR, we have a post game show where the wonderful people of Syracuse get to call in. We love that. But boy, do they just think firing Adrian Autry is like turning the lights on and off. It's
Yeah.
not that simple. And you brought up a fascinating perspective and point with the whole Chancellor situation.
Yeah.
Just explain that to people that aren't, probably aware that the university is actively looking for a new chancellor and how that kind of intertwines with the athletic department.
Yeah, this is a real twist in the situation. So
Yeah.
right now, Syracuse is actively searching for a new chancellor. Kent Severud has already announced he's going to Michigan. Now he's serving out the rest of this year, but he's a lame duck. So
Yeah.
I don't think he makes the call on this, nor do I think he should make the call on this if you're on the way out, right? So when the new chancellor is named, and I don't know when that's going to happen, I would imagine that you've got to put that person in place soon to send the message to the university community like this is our new
Yeah.
leader. When that chancellor looks at the athletic department, are they going to keep John Wildhack in charge? Are they going to keep current leadership in structure? Because making a decision about the head basketball coach at Syracuse is equivalent to a lot of major schools making the head coaching choice in football, right? Football is still
Mhm.
the sport that drives everything. It's still the biggest decision you can make in an athletic department, but basketball at Syracuse is 1A. That is a major decision, right? So ideally, you want to have all this in place by mid-March when this NCAA tournament starts and you're either tracking coaches that are coaching in the tournament that you would want as candidates if you are looking for a coach and be ready to strike and ready to go. So that complicates this. If this was just John Wildhack making the decision and we could point at John Wildhack, and right now it still is,
Yeah.
that simplifies the process. But who knows? And I've heard some things about who it could be. It's not
Mhm.
confirmed or anything,
Yeah.
but if they go with the person I think they're going to, and I don't want to speculate here,
No,
but
no.
what we can speculate about is they're going to look at everything,
Yeah.
and the athletic department could get an overhaul. So the timing of this weirdly could work out for Autry in that, like, they won't have time
Yeah.
to address this, but it is a major issue. And here we are at the end of January, going into February. It would behoove Syracuse to tell us who the new chancellor is generally, just to get that process flowing here. But that's item one for the new chancellor when they get to the athletic department is what do you do about the basketball coach?
Yeah. I think that's a fascinating point. It's kind of deciphering of who everyone's bosses is at the end of the
Right.
day and who's going to be making the calls in certain situations. Another interesting fact, and again, I would love to talk about this team and the current state and the games they have coming, but it just doesn't look that good. So I'm going to look to the future now. There's no like who's recruiting. There's no incoming freshmen
Right.
as of right now. How concerning is that? And is that also like weird? Like, shouldn't this team have guys lined up?
I would encourage you. Matt Norlander from CBS wrote a piece about this before the season started.
Mhm.
Syracuse is not alone here. There is a
Yeah.
lot of uncertainty about recruiting in 2026 and beyond just because of the structure of college basketball and NIL and everything. So Syracuse is not alone there. It is still weird though,
Yeah.
right? Like all through last year, what did we talk about? They knew they had Kyan Anthony and they knew they had Sadiq White, right? And my timing might be off there, but you knew well before this season started that you had an influx of freshmen and they added a couple late
Mhm.
as well. To not have a commitment next year, I get the portal, but you still have to get one or two impact transfers to come to recruits to come
Yeah.
to Syracuse University. Donnie Freeman in recent years, highest rated recruit since Carmelo Anthony. Obviously, Kyan Anthony, Sadiq White, top 100 guys. Like that still matters. And if anything, in basketball, it matters more because you get one like they're tracking Jordan Smith Jr. right now. Like you
Mhm.
get a commitment from him, like that's all you need.
Yeah.
In theory, right? Whereas in football, it's great that they got Calvin Russell, but they need like 10 of him in football. In basketball, you can get one guy, you can anchor the whole thing.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that you don't stick around that much. It's not like you're getting one for 4 years. Unlike in football, there's a little bit more, guarantee of a development. Perhaps, obviously, the transfer portal's kind of blown that up as well. So it definitely is something to keep an eye on. And just the last thing with basketball before we pivot over to lacrosse, what happens the rest of the year? It sucks because I mean, in my 4 years at the university, by the time February hits, it's all kind of just been fizzled out, hoping for a ACC tournament, miraculous run, and it just feels like we're once again in the same position.
That makes me sad that
I
you
know.
didn't get to experience
Yeah,
Syracuse basketball at its peak. There is nothing in this town than when
I know.
Syracuse is not only in the tournament
Yeah,
but making a run. Like
yeah,
the town shuts down. It's
yeah,
incredible. So I'm sorry that it appears you're not going to
yeah.
experience that, short of just the heater of all heaters that this team has to go on. And oh, by the way, the schedule only gets harder. North Carolina twice, and Duke and SMU and Virginia.
Oh,
And oh man, that is just a run. So what happens is, when do you make the decision?
yeah,
When do you make the call? Because technically, you can go into the ACC tournament with a chance to go to the NCAA tournament. But I don't know if you've seen Syracuse's record in the ACC tournament, but I think I've won more games
yeah,
in that tournament than they have. So and again, with the leadership structure vacuum that they're in, when do you make the call? Like, if this team, it just keeps stumbling and goes on this losing streak, like let's say they lose to Notre Dame, and then it's college basketball, anything can happen. Maybe they pull off an upset here or there, but if they go on an extended losing streak here, you have to address a short-term situation, because it's going to be, I call it the tea kettle theory. There's a tea kettle on the burner, it's screaming, and you just got to get it off to relieve the pressure of that, right? But look, I think we all know the answer to this. It's what John Wildhack said. It's meaningful games in March. If you don't make the NCAA tournament, I don't see how you can bring Adrian Autry back as the head coach. I just don't see how you can do that. That would be a 5-year stretch, which you didn't get to experience, and I'm sorry you didn't. A 5-year stretch of Syracuse basketball not in the NCAA tournament, which, by the way, he is part of all 5 of those years. He did not parachute in here. He's been a part of that. That is unthinkable. So there is no way you can bring him back if that's the case.
yeah. And the class right before me, the one that graduated last year, they were the first one not to see any tournament basketball since, pre-Jim Boeheim, or, early days, Jim Boeheim, which is fascinating. It will be interesting to see what happens the rest of the season. It feels like Adrian Autry can always pull out one signature ACC win, but I think he'll need more than one this time
Be a hell
around.
of a story if he does. And I
Yeah,
root for good stories.
absolutely.
So
We all do.
I, for your sake, honestly, like, I want you guys to
I know.
experience this. I
I
can't
know.
root for the team, but I can root for good stories, and I can root
Yeah,
for you guys to
exactly.
experience this. So I truly do hope you get to experience it.
Well, one thing that I am hoping to experience, when someone says, "Oh, what class were you?" I'll say I was the class of 26. Oh yeah, I was that lacrosse class, that lacrosse senior class that maybe gets the job done on Memorial Day weekend. You want to talk about basketball schedules? I mean, this lacrosse schedule is the ultimate gauntlet. Is that make the expectations less high because you have such a tough schedule, or is it still like, holy smokes, this is the golden era class, you got to get the job done?
I think that it's fascinating, because what could make this team what they are is the schedule. And what could bring them down is the schedule. Paul Pasqualoni, the former Syracuse football coach, everybody has kind of their version of this expression, but one thing he used to say a lot is the hottest fire makes the strongest steel, right? So either Syracuse is going to go through this schedule, this insane schedule. Syracuse always has a tough schedule. They have to, because there's no automatic bid out of the ACC, so they've got to really inject that thing with as much RPI as they can.
Exactly.
But for Gary Gait to put together a schedule where you are going on the road for 6 straight, and you are playing teams like Harvard, who brought you to overtime twice last year, you're going to Princeton, a team that took you to the brink in the NCAA quarterfinals, one of the greatest lacrosse games I've ever seen in my life, right? You're going to go to Denver. You're going to go to Penn. You're going to 2 games in Colorado at altitude. Why not? And let me put it to you this way. They probably aren't going to have to pack any sunscreen for that trip. You're playing Maryland at home. Just there are no breaks on the schedule. None. Even St. Joseph's is a good team. That's not the throwaway game. Like they're actually a team that could work their way into the rankings this year. So you're either going to be the strongest team you possibly can be, or you're going to melt under the heat of this schedule. I love that Gary is challenging these guys. I love that he is saying, this is the kind of team that we have, but I have got to elevate the expectations. Like, we're not going to do the same thing. Like John Desko, who just got into the Ring of Honor at Syracuse, and congratulations to him. John Desko fully took advantage of the dome, right? I don't think they left the dome most times until the end of March, because why would you? We're talking right now at the end of January with this, whatever they're calling it, the polar vortex around, and teams are canceling games left and right. Yeah. Syracuse, it's always 70 and sunny in the dome, as they like to say. So, man, I am fascinated by this because that schedule is a beast. It is an absolute beast. And look, as you go through the season, stuff happens. God forbid there's an injury or something, and it does not let up. So, at the very least, Syracuse is always a featured game for a lot of teams, but now Syracuse has to treat the schedule that way. Every week they're playing a huge game because they are.
Yeah, certainly. And I think those road games are also interesting, especially the ones in Philadelphia, Baltimore. You're expecting a good orange crowd, I would think, with that. So I think maybe Gary Gate was smart in that way in scheduling those road games that may get a little bit of a home crowd. But even, Boston University, the first game of the season, that's no layup whatsoever. And
not at all.
And lacrosse is, it's interesting how it works with the RPI. That really is the rule of thumb when it comes to, if you're playing postseason lacrosse. I think with this schedule, is there maybe more margin for error, where in past games it was like, oh, you can't slip up against these three teams. But now it's like, well, if you do slip up here or there, your RPI will still be pretty good with this schedule.
That's a great point. And you made two good points there. One, you're going to Baltimore, you're going to Philly, you're going to Boston, you're going to Denver. Like Gary even said this. I talked to him about the schedule. I got him on the phone. The first words out of my mouth are you crazy? But he did make that point. Like, they're going all over the country. They're still selling this game, right? You're recruiting and you're selling the game, and you're going to a lot of big cities so you can see them. But you made a great point about the committee is going to recognize that.
Yeah.
So let's say you lose to Maryland. Let's say you stub your toe at Princeton. Like, there are so many opportunities to make up for that. It does give you more margin for error in that their RPI, now this is last year's RPI, but ranges from 2 to 38 in their opponents. Their lowest rated RPI team is Air Force, 38. So that's the thing you have to do, and where Gary is smart. They've given you the blueprint. This is how you make the tournament, right? And he took full advantage of that in recent years, especially this year, and how he put his schedule together.
Yeah, and you kind of like that philosophy as a neutral. I mean, the more better games you get in college, the less of those, sleeper, non-competitive games, maybe the better for viewing.
And what a treat for us.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're going
put aside RPI and all this stuff.
Yeah.
What a treat for lacrosse fans.
Yeah.
Every week is a big game for Syracuse. This is going to be so much fun. I cannot wait.
And since coming here, I've fallen in love with the game of lacrosse, partially because I still feel it is a college game with players staying at the same spot for 4 years, with there being competitive games every week. It really just feels like a vintage college sport, and I love that, and I hope that never does change with the other sports, constantly in flux and all the changes there. You got to talk about him, Joey Spallina. He's been under the microscope since he's gotten here, rightfully so. He's all this talent, this and that. People always criticize his stats. He doesn't score enough goals. At the Tewaaraton, every game we're going to watch, it's going to be like, oh, here's the, one of the Tewaaraton favorites. What do you think he needs to do just to make sure he's a good team player and that the team success comes first and it's not so much about the individual things? Because credit to him, he never seems, every time, he talks to the media, he never seems to be caring about him first. He really, I think, always puts the team aspect before him.
Joey has had one of the brightest spotlights of any athlete that I have covered in Syracuse from the minute he walked on campus, right? 22, took on the legendary number one recruit, came in with so much hype. I remember that first game he plays against Vermont and he goes like 1 of 15 and everybody's like, whoa, what's going on with this guy? Then, of course, we're in the social media age where people have criticized Joey that, great number one polls like Sean Light at Notre Dame and Will Schaller at Maryland will shut him down. Joey is at a disadvantage at times because he's not the biggest guy, he's not the strongest guy, he's not the fastest guy, but he is the smartest player on the field at all times. So that's what Joey has to do, is be smart about, you're drawing the number one poll on the other team, who's open, how do you run that offense, right? So once they draw away from him, that's going to open up some opportunities for him. Balance that out because you've got a great attack. Now, Peyton Anderson has to step into that third spot, but Finn Thompson and Joey Spallina, I'll put them up against anybody. That midfield with Michael Leo and Luke Roa and Wyatt Hoddle and McCarthy and guys that kind of have to step up this year, I'll put them right up there as one of the better midfields in the country. The defense, Billy Dwan and Riley Figueres, by the way, is getting completely snubbed in all of these preseason rankings. I know you got to pick one or the other. It's a good problem to have, but I don't think people realize how freaking good he is. Like, he is one of the most fundamentally sound defensemen I've ever watched. He just doesn't screw up. You've got a great goaltender and you've got a great face-off guy. Now, I know we're talking about Joey, but that's my point.
No.
Joey has to look out there. You don't have to do this yourself.
No.
You don't. And he is the quarterback. He's the ex-attackman. And when Gary Gates says Joey's got to do Joey things, those are Joey things. Joey's stats last year, 35 goals, 55 assists. Think of that gap. Think of how much he is running the offense, but make no mistake about it. When he sees a matchup and he has to be the offense, Princeton game in the tournament, he can do either thing. That's what makes him so dangerous, right? You shut down Joey Spallina, there's a line of other guys that can do it, but you have to shut down Joey Spallina because the minute you lax on that, no pun intended, he's going to kill you. He will find the angle and generate that offense.
Yeah. And last one for you. You referenced the Bills, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but they have. It's been it was like, oh, you got to get to this point, get to this point. They've gotten to every point except the last one, the big one. For Syracuse, I think last year was all about getting to that Memorial Day weekend. Mm-hmm. They got there, but you especially know, being a Bills supporter, it's not that easy to just get right back there. What do you think is not necessarily stopping this team from getting there, but is there a aspect that you think could be really challenging and something that people maybe haven't thought of or seen yet?
Yeah, it's called the Maryland Terrapins.
Yeah.
They have to beat Maryland. And not only do they have to beat Maryland on February 13th, which, by the way, I don't know if you can get the day off from work or what your situation is for those of you at school. Take the day off and go watch lacrosse at the Dome because you got Syracuse, North Carolina women's lacrosse, Chloe Humphrey, the best player in college lacrosse.
Love how they did
with
that.
Joey Spallina.
With the back-to-backs.
And then, exactly. And then Syracuse, Maryland.
Yeah.
On the same day. What a treat. So go to that.
Friday the 13th, too.
Friday the 13th. Yeah, there you go. So maybe that's what Syracuse needs.
Yeah.
To beat Maryland because the Terps have beaten them 8 straight. They have to put it in their conscience that they can beat this team. Because you brought it up. Getting to the Final Four last year took a lot of pressure off these guys because they got back there. They showed they could do it. But then Maryland punked them. They did. You go watch that game. Maryland punked them. So if they can put that in their conscience that we can beat Maryland because they're going to see them again. They're going to play them again, probably in the Final Four. But Maryland's not on the schedule twice, but that's just the way the lacrosse gods operate. You got to get through Maryland. If they can get through Maryland, they can do anything. That's the biggest thing to me. That schedule, all the other teams, everything we talked about, it still applies. Mm-hmm. But if they beat Maryland on the 13th, they become the favorite to win this thing. And that's the biggest thing that they have to overcome because they've done everything else, right? So to use the Bills comparison, he wasn't around this year, but they've got to beat Patty Mahomes in Kansas City.
Yeah.
To truly exercise that demon. He has kept them out of the Super Bowl more than anybody. Maryland has kept Syracuse from achieving what they need to more than any school out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome, Brent. Thank you so much again for taking the time. Great insight as always, and enjoy the rest of the basketball season and into lacrosse as well.
Thanks for having me. Sorry for my poor voice today, but
No
I do
worries.
appreciate you having me on. Always enjoy talking to you guys.
Thank you.